this chapter, we're going to talk about overriding theme functions. So far, when we've seen HTML output to the page by Drupal, it's always come out of template files. Things like the node template file and the page template file are used to generate the HTML for really big chunks of the page, like the entire node here, or the entire page and all of the contents within it. There's a lot of smaller things on the page, though, too, that don't run through template files. Things like a user's name here, where we've printed out the username, the tags that are being printed out on this node here, and a bunch of other pieces of the page that are small enough chunks of HTML. It doesn't really make sense to have them be a template file, but we still want to make sure that they can be overridden by the theme layer. So these all use what are called theme functions, or any function in Drupal that starts with the word theme underscore and then something. So theme underscore username or theme underscore breadcrumb. The main difference of when you would use a theme function to output something versus a template file is generally based on how much PHP is going to be required in order to generate that output, and sort of smaller pieces of the page like usernames. Every single link on the page actually runs through the theme link function. And there's a little bit of a performance increase to using a function as opposed to a template file because Drupal doesn't need to read in that template file every single time it prints out a link on the page. So there's a lot of common places that theme functions are used. Places like usernames, or if we click through and look at an actual node page, the breadcrumb up here at the top, this is also being generated by a theme function. I'd like to take a look at how we can override a theme function using our template.php file in order to change the HTML that's output by one of these functions. The first thing we'll want to do is figure out what theme function is actually being used to theme different portions of the page. We can use the theme developer tool to do that. So I'm going to turn that on real quick by going to modules, scrolling down, finding the theme developer tool, and I'll just enable that. Once that's turned on, I can use the checkbox to turn on the theme developer tool. And once I've done that, I can hover over elements on the page and select different things, and it'll give me information about those elements. So here, for example, I can select this user's name. And when I do so, it's telling me that this user's name is being output using the function theme underscore link. I can also start to look at the parents here, just like we did with the template files before, and see all of the things above it that are being called as well. So theme link here is outputting the name as a link, but the theme username function is what's responsible for generating that username and printing it out on the page. I can also do the same with the breadcrumb trail up here. I can click on the breadcrumb trail and see that this is being output by a function named theme underscore breadcrumb. Once I've figured out what I want to override on the page and which theme function is generating that, like theme breadcrumb in this case, using the theme developer tool, I can actually just click on the function called here, and it'll take me to the documentation for that function on the api.drupal.org website. So this shows me an example of the theme breadcrumb function. And then what I'm going to do in order to override this in my theme, I'm actually going to just copy and paste the whole function here, excluding the opening and closing PHP tags, but just copy the function definition itself. So now I have a copy of that theme function. This is sort of equivalent to how we would make a duplicate of the page template file from the system module or the node template file into our theme. I'm copying the theme function from Drupal core, and I'm going to use that inside of my theme. Jump back to my site. So then what I can do is inside of my template.php file, for my theme, so 960 robots template.php, I can paste in that code that we just copied from api.drupal.org. So I now have this function theme underscore breadcrumb. The last step to overriding this theme function is to actually rename it. And what I need to do is take the name of this function and remove the word theme and replace it with the name of my theme. So I'll change this to 960 robots underscore breadcrumb. And if I save this, and when I clear the cache on my site, I expect Drupal to start using my overridden version of the breadcrumb theme function instead of the Drupal core one. Just to prove that that's working, I'm going to add a little bit of extra text at the end of the breadcrumb that's going to be printed out. So I'm just going to add the number 960 so that I know that it's using my breadcrumb function. I switch back to our site. I can close the theme developer tool. And I need to clear the cache in order for Drupal to find my overridden version of the theme breadcrumb function. Anytime you add a new override of a theme function to your template.php file, you need to make sure you clear your cache. I'm going to use the performance page to clear the cache. You'll notice that the toolbar up here is a little bit out of alignment. I think this is because we were using the theme developer tool and it added a bunch of extra markup to the page in order to do its thing. But it should work just fine. So we can click on performance, clear all caches. And now when I go back and refresh the page, I should see the word or the number 960 at the end of our breadcrumb trail here. Great. So now I see home and then 960, just like I added in our theme function. 960, however, isn't very useful. What might be a bit more useful, though, is if we added the title of the page that we're currently viewing to the end of the breadcrumb trail. This is something that you'll see on a lot of different websites. So let's see how we could do that. If I take a look at my template.php, I've now overridden this theme breadcrumb function, and I can make any changes to it that I want to and add additional information. What I'd like to do is always display the title of the page that you're currently viewing at the end of the breadcrumb. I'll probably also want to have this delimiter in between elements in the breadcrumb. So right now this function is saying, as long as the breadcrumb variable is not empty, go ahead and implode that variable. So I know breadcrumb here is likely an array of all the links, different pages that represented in this breadcrumb trail, and adding a delimiter in between each one, this character here. I want to make sure that that delimiter also gets added at the end of the breadcrumb trail, right before our page title. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. So now I should see breadcrumb trail, and then an additional delimiter at the end. And now I need a way to get the title of the page that I'm currently viewing. If we switch back over to our website and open up api.drupal.org, there's a handy function that you can use in order to get the title of the page that you're currently viewing. It's Drupal get title. Let me check out the documentation for that. So Drupal get title will allow us to get the title of the current page for display on the page and in the title bar. That's great. Inspect the code real quick. It looks to me like it's just going to return the title of the page. It's running it through this check plain function already, so I know that it should be secure, so we can just print it out. So great, I'm happy with that. I can go back to my template.php. And I'll create a new variable named title and assign it the value returned by the Drupal getTitle function. And then over here, in the output that's being returned from my 960 robots breadcrumb function, I'm just going to add that title into the HTML that's returned. So now I should see whatever the breadcrumb trail is, in this case say home, linked to the home page, followed by another delimiter, and then the title of the page that's currently being viewed. Let's switch back over to our site and refresh the page to see that in action. And there we go. We can see, just as we expected, home, the element in the breadcrumb trail, linked to the home page, the delimiter, and then the title of the page that we're currently viewing. This is a good example of overriding theme functions in Drupal. If I turn on the theme developer tool again real quick, I can click on the breadcrumb trail again, and you'll see that it's now using our 960 robots underscore breadcrumb function, instead of where it was previously using the theme underscore breadcrumb function. This is a simple example of overriding theme functions, but the concept applies to all of them. The basic concept is find the thing on the page that you'd like to theme, like the username, for example. Find the theme function that is used to generate that element on the page. Copy and paste the code for that function into your template.php file, and then rename the function to use the name of your theme. So in our case, 960 robots instead of the word theme here. So this would be 960 robots underscore username if we wanted to override the username function. Make any changes that you want to the code of that function, and then flush the cache, and it should start using your function to output that element on the page.